Good afternoon, folks. Welcome back to Press for Truth. I'm your host, Dan Dix, and today we have a very special guest on the line. We're going to be speaking with Jesse Ventura, former governor of Minnesota, former pro wrestler, best-selling author, and host of Aura.tv's Off the Grid. Jesse, thank you very much for taking some time to speak with us here today at Press for Truth. It seems that there was some censorship on you before, but maybe is that fair to say that you have more of a free range now to say whatever you want?
Well, yeah, I certainly do. The problem you had with conspiracy theory, first of all, it's a reality TV show.
Right.
Second of all, True TV owned the rights to it.
Okay.
And True TV is owned by a big conglomerate and corporation. They're part of Turner and all of that. And so, you know, you're always going to face the, for lack of a better term, the bean counters upstairs, you know, the non-creative people that like to think they are.
Yeah.
And that's just unfortunately part of that mainstream business that you have to deal with. The thing that's better about what I do now is that I have total control. Now, there is a command center that researches and sets up the shows for me, but if I walk in that morning, I can change it on the snap of my fingers, whatever they have scheduled.
Yeah.
And I can switch it to whatever I want to talk about. It's whatever pushes my buttons, and I make that choice. No one else does.
Mm-hmm. That's how it should be, right? I mean,
Well, I don't know. That's just how it is on the internet. That ain't how it is on mainstream.
True.
Because I've worked there also, and I just prefer this way rather than mainstream's way right now.
I think most people do. I think the mainstream way is dying. The old dinosaur media is dying, and people are not tuning into the TV sets anymore.
Well, and I agree with you because, see, they have gone too far the other way. They're not news anymore. They're entertainment.
Yes. Yeah.
And you know who's at fault for that, don't you?
Who's that?
Believe it or not, the show 60 Minutes. Let me explain.
Okay.
60 Minutes was a phenomenal investigative show, but what it did, it zoomed to number one on the ratings chart. And before that, all the bean counters thought the news was a write-off. They would lose money on the news, they'd make it up in the entertainment division, but they felt that the news and informing people was important enough that they didn't have to be a moneymaker. All of a sudden, the show 60 Minutes came. It shot to number one on the charts, and the bean counter says, whoa, wait a minute. You mean we can make money off the news?
Right.
And it was at that point, news did not become news anymore. News became entertainment.
Right.
It's now about ratings points.
Yeah.
It's about sponsors, and it's about making revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute the news got to making revenue, that's the downfall of it.
Right. Yeah, well, it's always about following the money, and I know you're strong on the idea of salary caps for the one percenters, so to speak. Is that fair to say that you?
Yeah, well, and it's not new. Don't give me credit for it. I see it all around me every day. You know where I see it?
Where?
The National Football League, baseball, hockey, and basketball, they all have salary caps on their teams. Right. So LeBron James can only make so much.
Mm-hmm. But
salary cap.
You know,
wait, they're doing it to protect the billionaire owners.
Right.
Well, if you can have a salary cap on the pro athletes and it's not communist or socialist, well then why can't you have a salary cap on CEOs?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you can be liberal with it. My view is this. Anybody that can't live on $24 million a year, now that's $2 million a month. Mm-hmm. If you can't survive on $24 million a year, I'm not an advocate for capital punishment, but I think in that case I might want to bring it back.
Right.
You can laugh. That's done as a joke.
Right.
You know, because, I mean, think about it. If you can't live on $2 million a month, something's wrong with you.
I agree, but is it not somewhat oppressive to tell somebody they can't do it?
Walmart, the Walton family.
Right.
Each one of them makes about $10 billion a year, and yet we're forced to subsidize their workers. Mm-hmm. Because their workers don't get enough money, they have to go on government subsidy, be it food stamps stamps, be it everything else. While the owners make $10 billion a year. Why should anybody need $10 billion in a year?
Well, where do you draw the line, right? I mean, there's some people.
Well, I don't know. I drew the line. I arbitrarily picked out 24 million. You think that's too low? Raise it to 50.
Right.
You think but who couldn't live off $24 million a year? Mm-hmm. Could you?
I'm sure I could.
Yeah, I bet you could. I bet you live pretty good on it.
Right.
I could. I wouldn't need more than that.
Right.
So what? And then you could take the surplus, apply it to the federal deficit, apply it back and give it to workers, do whatever. But the difference between the CEO and the worker has gone up 350 times in the last couple decades.
Right.
It's obscene.
Well, the CEO is a worker as well. What about the people who are good, honest people, and they've worked really hard all their life and made a lot of money?
I've been a CEO of a state. Yeah, you're busy, but you're only as good as the people who work for you.
Right.
You think these CEOs do everything? No, they don't. Yeah, come on. They're white collar. I mean, Dick Cheney. Do you think Dick Cheney could go out and dig a ditch? I don't, because his ticker'd stop.
But when we know that fiat...
And yet he gets paid 100 times more than the guy who digs the ditch. Mm-hmm. Because what? He shuffles paper?
Mm-hmm. Well, when we know that fiat currency is the way that they control people, I mean, how is it that capping the salary of some 1%ers on Wall Street, how is that going to change the system of fiat currency and the international banking?
Well, first of all, you're not. What you need to do is do what I've advocated for over 2 decades, and that's abolish the income tax and go to a national sales tax. It's way better. Then it's pay as you go. If you don't want to pay no taxes this week, don't buy nothing.
Right.
Pretty simple, ain't it? And you don't have to tax food. You don't have to tax clothing under $200. Mm-hmm. So you can buy your underwear, you can buy your blue jeans, you can buy the essentials of life. You won't get taxed. Mm-hmm. Food won't be taxed. That's an essential of life. Mm-hmm. And you do a national sales tax. There's no deductions. There's no nothing. You wouldn't have to face audits anymore because everything would be paid business to government, which is already being done. Mm-hmm. It makes too much sense, see? It's the common sense middle, which makes it radical.
Right.
Instead, we get the income tax, which is so thick and has so many loopholes, the rich don't have to pay. They find their way out of it all, and the poor people pay through the nose.
Right.
Kind of like the military draft went. The rich didn't have to go, only the middle class and the poor did.
Right.
When they had the draft. I lived through it. Right. But the point being is, if we switch our system to a national sales tax, we could eliminate a great deal of these problems, but the upper 1% don't want that because then they'd be taxed equally.
Right.
See, here's my belief. Wealth is not by what you earn. Wealth is by what you spend. Because you could earn $1 million a year, but if you live in a studio apartment and drive a beat-up old rusty Volkswagen, you're hardly living like a millionaire, so why should you be taxed like one? Now, if you make money and you own the penthouse and you buy a yacht and you buy a Mercedes, well, you're living like a millionaire, so therefore you will be taxed like one.
Right.
Simple, ain't it?
Well, it seems so. But, when dealing with money, it comes down to the love of money and the greed that people have, and that's always going to be, it's inherent in human beings.
Well, so what? But if it's a national sales tax, greed goes with it. If you're greedy and buy the expensive thing, you're going to pay more, aren't you?
Right. Yeah.
And it keeps people on a budget, doesn't it?
Right.
Ha-ha. Isn't that amazing? You won't be able to buy something unless you got the money to buy it.
Right. What a concept.
Because you got to pay the tax on it. Plus, it would get everybody. It would get tourists. It would get anybody that visited here if they bought anything. And it would put the government on a direct correlation with the economy. Because if you're not buying stuff, they're not getting your taxes. So it's apparent for them to keep the economy running good so that they get their taxes. Right now, they're number one. Because they get your money before you do. With the national sales tax, you're number one. You get the money first and then give buy. Much better, don't you think?
Kind of vote with your dollar?
No, but it's much better. You're number one. If you follow the money, then that dictates who number one is. Right now, the government's number one because they get your money first. You get it second. With a national sales tax, you'd get the gross on your check. Imagine that, the number you don't even know what it is. That gross number. That would be eliminated. You'd get that, and then you'd determine by what you paid taxes, by what you bought. It's all too simple, though, but I'm the radical.
Yeah, well, sometimes that's what's required is radical thinking in order to take us out of this.
So the point I'm making is simple and common sense today is radical.
Yeah, right.
That's the point I'm making. If you're simple and have common sense, that makes you a radical today.